So just to run through what we're going to be talking about today, there's a number of areas that we wanted to cover in the webinar, so I've just got them up on the slide here. I thought I'd start just with a little bit of just introductions of what we're doing today. I'd talk a little bit about what we think critical museology is and why it is that you might want to study museum studies. I'm going to say a few words about why it's important if you want a career in museums to do a postgraduate course. And then I'm going to spend a little bit more time thinking about the University of Aberdeen's approach to museum studies, because we do things here that are perhaps a little different from other courses you might have been researching. And if you're interested in coming to Aberdeen, I thought perhaps you would really like to know what it is that we do and how we involve our staff and our students in museum work. And that'll feed into the section on resources for students as well. After that, I thought we'd talk just ever so briefly about what you would do after you've got your degree in museum studies, so the kind of museums that you might want to work in. And then I'll hand over to Shannon and Rachel, who are going to talk about their experience of being students here at the university. And I should say they're both from the United States, so they may have particular perspectives on what it's like to be an overseas student. Okay, so I wanted to say a little bit about how I came to be here, because when I was discussing the webinar with Shannon and Rachel this morning, we were sort of saying, well, you know, should I say a bit about myself as well? And we thought that it would be useful for you to know a little bit about some of the staff that you would be learning from if you come here. So I'll talk a bit about the others later on, but for myself, I'm an anthropologist. Although I actually trained as a historian. I did my undergraduate degree here at the University of Aberdeen. And but I'm very much a historian and anthropologist who is passionate about museums. I always have been. I worked as a volunteer at the University of Aberdeen's museums when I was doing my undergraduate degree. And that led me to do graduate work in museum studies at the University of Leicester. And then I went on to do my master's degree at the University of Cambridge and my PhD at the University of Oxford. And by that point, I'd got very interested in issues of collaborative museology and working specifically with Indigenous people. And so most of my fieldwork and my museum-based research has been with the Blackfoot Nations of southern Alberta and Montana. And I've been very involved in looking at how those peoples can connect with historic collections and use them to tell their own stories. So I've done a lot of work with museums in Oxford and Cambridge, but also with the Glenbow Museum in Calgary and the Galt Museum, which is in Lethbridge in Alberta. And I work a lot with the Smithsonian as well. More recently, I've been working with the British Museum and with colleagues in the National Art Museum of the Sakha Republic, which is in the Russian Far East. And again, that's been a project that's been looking at how historic collections can be used in contemporary projects of cultural revitalization. So that's my background, and I try and bring a lot of those kinds of perspectives into the teaching that I can do. So if we move on to what critical museology might be, I suppose the question that we might want to ask is, how did we get from here? The image that you can see there of the very beautiful historic building is the History of Science Museum at the University of Oxford. Now, today it's the History of Science Museum, but formerly it was the Old Ashmolean. And the Ashmolean is the world's oldest surviving purpose-built museum, and it was opened in 1863. So how did we get from that to 2017, that should say, which is the new Louvre Museum in Abu Dhabi, which just opened just a few months ago. So that's one of the sort of key ideas that is kind of underlying the program. How did we get from these very scientifically oriented museums of the 17th century through to the very extravagant looking art museum of the 21st century? And ultimately, what critical museology aims to do is to give its students a grounding in the broader theoretical and historical contexts in which museums have emerged. And this allows them to engage critically with contemporary museum practice. And so as such, critical museology is not just an essential intellectual tool for better understanding museums and related exhibitionary institutions. So, for example, living history museums, there's all kinds of other museums which are akin to museums. One of the big questions we ask in the course is what exactly a museum is. But critical museology is also crucial for developing new exhibitionary genres, for telling untold stories. So the kind of work that I do with Indigenous people would come into this. It's useful for re-articulating knowledge systems, thinking about public dissemination, and reimagining organisational and managerial structures. So at Aberdeen, we consider all of these ideas through the lens of several core courses that consider the philosophical and practical questions concerning the origins of museums, their variety of forms, and the practical application of museological theory. And across our courses, we approach the museum from a series of perspectives, and we consider themes such as collecting and curiosity, nation building, museum architectures and what they symbolise, colonialism and decolonisation, and so on. And we look at all of these different themes and their relationships with museums by examining a range of different case studies, and this allows us to explore a range of different museum contexts. And so we're interested in art museums, in ethnography museums, natural history museums, social history museums, and so on, in a variety of regions. And we're very concerned in Aberdeen that we should give the students the opportunity to apply the theoretical ideas that they encounter to their practical engagement of museum work, whether this is through collections-based analysis or museum management or education and outreach. So if we think now about some of the career benefits of undertaking a postgraduate course in museum studies, ultimately, prospective employers do recognise that a good course enhances your skills and knowledge, and it does extend your practical experience. So if you're interested in a career in museums, this really is the thing for you to do. Now, of course, you're not guaranteed a job after finishing your course, but there are a number of ways in which museum courses can help you get ahead of the field. So I've got a number of points up here just on this slide. So for instance, I think most of our students who've taken the course over the years would be of the opinion that taking a course would be very helpful for allowing you to think about your professional networks and understanding the sector better. And so we do this through placements, but we also do this through exposure to museum professionals who are working in a range of different museum settings. Having the qualification in museum studies is really important when you're actually applying for jobs, of course, because it might give you, an advantage over some other candidates who've got similar experience. Essentially, most museum positions, even the entry-level positions now, do require a postgraduate qualification in museum studies. Now, of course, in addition to all of this, I think those of us who are interested and passionate about museums would recognise that being able to think about them critically is really important, and it just helps us develop as professionals. And so that's one of the opportunities that are available when you take a postgraduate course, the discussions that you're able to have with your fellow students, many of whom will come from very different backgrounds. Some will have worked in museums, some will be new to the profession, will allow you to think about how you might be able to apply those practical skills in a variety of different settings. And of course, some people who take museum studies courses, myself included, do in fact end up going on to do further graduate study later on. And so just having that background for me and knowing how it was that museums functioned has been really useful in my career as a museum-based researcher. So I want to say a few words now about how we approach museum studies at the University of Aberdeen. Our programme has been running for a number of years now, and it is expanding. I think one of the key selling points of our course is that class size is actually quite small, so students do get to know each other really quite well. Our students do come from a range of different countries, and they certainly have a range of different backgrounds when they come here, both disciplinary. For example, some students have got majors in art history or anthropology. Others are coming from quite different disciplinary backgrounds. We make sure that all of the staff have got some experience of working museums on the course, and in fact many of us are practitioners as well as experts in our particular field, and the students do get exposure to staff from across the university, and I'll talk a little bit about some of those individuals shortly. One of the key selling points, I think, of our programme is that we do have really extensive university collections here. Our university was founded in 1495, And so if you can imagine, all the people who've been through the university since that point, many of them have made donations to the university over the centuries. And we're really involved with making sure that our students, whether they're museum studies students or other students at the university, have got the opportunity to work with those collections for their own research and to develop their own interests using those collections. I think one of the other selling points of our course is that we've got really very strong connections with museums within Scotland and internationally, and that's largely based on the connections that our staff have. Many of our students do participate in voluntary work across the sector, particularly in Aberdeen and the immediate vicinity, and we're able to facilitate that. And the last point on this slide, of course, is that we have a range of courses, and so although we do have some courses that all students would have to take, there is enough flexibility within the programme that students with particular interest in, for example, archaeology or education, for instance, could pursue interests in those areas. So here are some pictures of some of the staff who teach on the course. There's myself up in the top corner there. In the centre of the slide is Neil Curtis. Now, Neil is the head of museums, and he's been at the university working with the museum collections for many years now, and has got an absolute wealth of knowledge of the museum's history, of the collection's history, and he's been absolutely fundamental to developing our museum studies programme. So Neil and myself are the two people who are most heavily involved in teaching. But we also have options that are run by other staff members. So for instance, Elizabeth Curtis, in the picture up at the top there, she's the woman who's wearing the brightly coloured top. She's a specialist in museum education, and she's also a specialist in community outreach work, and she tries and brings those interests into her teaching. We've got Rick Neck down at the bottom. He's an archaeologist. He's been he's doing some really quite amazing work at the moment in Nunalak in Alaska. He's been involved in a project to recover archaeological findings, and he's involved in doing community work and in making sure that those pieces are repatriated to Alaska in the next few years. In the centre, we've got Jenny Downs, who's the curator of exhibitions, but she's also a historian of science. And we have Beth Lord, who is a philosopher and teaches on museum philosophy and the kind of ideology behind museums. So in terms of what you would study if you were to take the course, the programme is offered full-time over one calendar year. So it runs from early September to the end of August. And you can take the course either full-time over 1 year or part-time over 2 years. The course it involves 180 credits. We've got three core courses. That's a change from what might be on the website at the moment, because we're doing a few changes to the programme. But students who take the course here would have to take courses on the museum idea, which is about the history and philosophy of museums, on museum practice, which is kind of what it says it is. It's a very practical course where museum studies students get to talk to different practitioners and to think about some of the everyday issues involved in working in museums. And then all students will take a course called Researching Museum Collections, which involves doing hands-on archival and museum-based research using the university collections. In the second half session, students would take a core course on curating an exhibition, and this is one of our very popular courses, and I think it's one of our really unique offerings that we have at the University of Aberdeen. This is an option for students to work together to develop a student-led exhibition, and there's a different theme every year, and each member of the team takes on a different role in developing that exhibition. We also have a core course on learning in museums. This is the one that's taught by Elizabeth Curtis in education. And then there are a number of electives that students could take as well. So for instance, from the law department, from the art history department, from history, from archaeology, and so on. In the third session of the year, students would take their museum studies placement. There are a number of different museums that students can go to for this. It's a number of weeks that they would be based in that museum, and they write up a project based on that experience. So we've had students go to museums all over Scotland. Some choose to stay in Aberdeen, some go further afield. And there's also the option for students to set up their own placements beyond Scotland as well. So in terms of the resources that are available for you, I just thought I'd include quite a lot of pictures in the next bit because I think it's interesting for you to see the kinds of resources that we have. As I said, the university was founded in 1495, so you know, that's over 5 centuries of collecting that this institution has been doing. But in terms of formal museum, that wasn't established until 1786. So I'm just thinking about my history here. That's 10 years after the establishment of the United States, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, we've had a museum for a very, very long time here, and we have much documentation accompanying our collections, and it really is a wonderful resource. Our collections are very wide-ranging. They cover everything through from antiquities through to natural sciences, medical collections, demonstration collections, and so on. And you can see the bottom points in the slide here. We've got the 5th largest collection of international and national significance. That's within Scotland, and our entire collections have been recognised by the Museums Association as being of international significance. So these are really important collections that we have at the university, and we're very keen to make sure that students access them as much as possible. Just a few examples of pictures here and some figures, just to give you a sense of the extent and the range. So you can see that's quite a lot of material that would be covered by the heading of human culture. Medical collections include everything from demonstration models from some of our science professors from the last few hundred years, through to papier-mâché models. This is a really important specimen that you can see here, the anatomical model. In terms of actual museum buildings, we've got a number of museum buildings on campus. We've got the King's Museum, which is the main museum campus, the main museum building on campus. That's where we have our student-run exhibitions. We also have a zoology museum that's been renovated recently. And we have some other museum spaces which students would have access to in various degrees. So for instance, the museum storage area is up at Marshall College, which is about a 20-minute walk from the main campus. And that's where our collections are housed, the collections research areas are housed, and we also have a conservation laboratory there. And then the picture at the bottom there is an area called the Art Space, which is in our education building. And we use that for temporary exhibitions of printed material, photographs, and art and so on. And we have external exhibitions coming in there as well as internal exhibitions. Because we're a research-intensive university, the collections are very much the focus of research projects, whether those are from university staff or from external researchers. So the Tracing Lines in Neolithic Aberdeenshire project is one that's currently underway, and that's being run by an external academic, and he's using some of our archaeological material as part of his research project. The second image that you can see there is a project that I directed a number of years ago, which was looking at Indigenous collections and relations between Scots and Aboriginal peoples in the fur trade, looking at that idea and that theme through the lens of material culture. And we use the university collections quite heavily in that. Other current research that's going on is the university collections have been involved in what's called the Pacific Collections Review. So we've got very extensive collections from the Pacific area, really important anthropological collections that are quite early in date. And so they've been recently researched as part of a Scotland-wide project. We've also done a CAT scan, if you would excuse the pun, of a mummified cat. And so we were able to use some of our medical equipment to see what was inside that particular mummy. Although our museum service is quite small, we do put on a number of exhibitions every year, and of course the museum studies students are very involved in this, in addition to their own exhibition which they put on usually in the summer that would be launched. We also have usually 1 or 2 other exhibitions that are housed in the townhouse on campus. So these are some posters from some of our previous exhibitions. So for instance, the Scottish Warrior exhibition was a student-led exhibition that was curated by Museum Studies students. That has been on in the last year. Bright Ideas and Victorian Time and The Land Endures, these are also exhibitions which Museum Studies students have put on. And these exhibitions are usually running for about 6 months at a time. And so there's lots of opportunities for the Museum Studies students to not only get involved in the curation of the exhibition, but also to look at evaluation as well, which of course is really important. We also find lots of opportunities to engage the Museum Studies students in other aspects of the museum's work. So for instance, we often ask for volunteers to get involved in things like the Lates, Museum Lates, which are public events. We had one in the Zoology Museum recently, which involved bringing in some meerkats. We also have things like occasionally the temporary exhibitions that we run in other parts of the university. We will ask for Museum Studies students to get some experience by helping us install those exhibitions. So of course that's really good experience. The image that you can see in the bottom of the slide there is a recent exhibition which has been launched in the art space, and a couple of our Museum Studies students helped with the installation of that exhibition. There are lots of volunteering opportunities at the museum as well, and so we do encourage all our students to take part in that as well if they can. Just wanted to show you just a few pictures of some of the other learning resources that we have here at the university. At the top you can see some pictures of the library. We're very proud of our new library. This was opened in 2012, I believe it was, and it's really a fantastic resource for students. Again, being an ancient university, we've got archives that go back, many hundreds of years, and so we have a wonderful archival room which students are able to use as well. We do encourage all our students to attend many of the seminars that take place across the university, not just in museum studies, but also in other disciplines. So for instance, in anthropology and art history. And we make sure that if there are any public events that are relevant to Museum Studies students, we do tell them about those. So a current example would be there's a public talk taking place in Aberdeen, I think in a couple of days' time, by the director of the Victoria and Albert Museum, which is one of the main museums in the UK. And there's a branch of that museum opening just down the road from Aberdeen later this year. So it's a real opportunity for the students to go and hear a senior museum director talk about that project. So just to say a few words about what happens once you've got your degree, because I've spent most of the time up until this point talking about what you would be doing while you were studying. I think it's really important for anyone considering a museum studies course to think about where students have gone since. Our students have tended to do very well on graduating. We've had students go to a range of different museums, some of them very prominent museums such as the British Museum and the National Museums of Scotland. We've also had some of our students from the United States have been able to get jobs back at home. So for instance, a recent student is now employed at the Tampa Bay History Center. Some of our students do go on to further graduate study. And we also have a number of students who are not doing museum studies, but are doing anthropology or history and are working with museum collections. And we do encourage all our students to interact so they can learn from one another. In terms of career support, we've got very good career support advisors at the university. They can on writing your resume, your CV and so on. They can also point students to the direction of relevant websites where you can find out about museum jobs. I think one of the key selling points of our course is that all museum studies students also, for the duration of their studies here, are entitled to free membership of the Scottish Museums Federation, and this entitles them to the career services of that federation, and that includes getting guidance on reviewing CVs and arranging mock interviews and all of those kinds of things which are important when you're getting on the career ladder. In terms of the kinds of jobs that our museum studies graduates have done, these include all aspects of museum work actually. but they include education work, marketing, curatorial, and so on. So the course really does provide for all aspects of museum work, and I think if you do your placement, you can focus on a particular kind of research or museum professional expertise, should you wish. So I think that's probably enough from me. What I'm going to do now is pass you over to Shannon, who is one of our current museum studies students, and she's going to tell you a little bit about why it was that she chose to come to Aberdeen, given all the other possibilities that were available to her.
Hello, my name is Shannon, and I, just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I originally studied my undergraduate degree in history and theater arts with the intention of going into living history. I then had a few internships with collections and kind of fell in love with the collections aspect of it, so I started, I wanted to get into museum studies as my course of study. So one of the things that really drew me to Scotland more generally is it's always been a personal dream of mine to come over and see Scotland, to see the United Kingdom and all of that. During my undergraduate degree, I missed the opportunity to study abroad, so I wanted to take this opportunity to immerse myself in a new culture and just kind of see things from a different perspective, because I feel like it's extremely important to understand. A lot of museums have collections that are very varied, have a lot of different cultures, so I think it's very important to be able to look at things from several different perspectives. And then when I started looking into schools that were abroad, one of the reasons that I chose Aberdeen first and foremost was that it was financially viable for me to come here. It's very affordable. The fact that it's in a one-year course instead of a two-year course really kind of drew me to it. The size of the school is actually really nice. I think it's 14,000 students, something like that. And so it's big enough that you don't feel like you're running into the same people every day. You can learn from a lot of people, but it's also not so big that you feel like you're getting lost in the crowd. Another thing that was important for me was, would I be safe on campus? And there is the reputation of Aberdeen is a very safe city. The campus is very safe, and I feel extremely comfortable here. And then another thing that I really enjoyed about it was that it does have a reputation for being one of the top schools, one of the top ranked universities in the world. So just being able to say that I was a part of that and being able to learn from people like Alison and Neil and the others who are very knowledgeable in their fields and are doing a lot of really good work was another reason that I think Aberdeen was kind of won out for me in the end. And I think that's all I've got to say. So I'm gonna pass you guys off to Rachel, and she's gonna talk about just kind of what we've been studying and doing all of that. So.
Hi. Okay. So my name's Rachel, and I'm from Los Angeles. I went to the University of Georgia, and I majored in art history and mass media arts. But I also, like Shannon, went to study abroad, and University of Aberdeen was great and definitely the one I wanted to go to. But I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about kind of a day in the life of a museum studies student, and kind of maybe what your typical day might be like, or the other things you can do in your free time. So one of the things is classes are typically only once or twice a week for a couple hours. So this semester and last semester, I had classes 3 days a week, and I had Tuesdays and Fridays off this semester and last semester. So I always had free time to work or study when I wasn't in class, but it also allows you to get involved in other activities on campus, or to, you gotta go run errands or whatever you need to do. You always have plenty of time to do that. But then also throughout the week, a lot of us volunteer at King's Museum to get experience working in a museum that allows you to interact with the visitors and just kind of see how museums run. So that's just kind of one of the things we do on campus. But also, because there is a large number of international students here from all over the world, and there are a lot of, especially in the postgraduate area, the International Center is very active on campus, and that could be something that you're interested in getting involved with. I know they hold a number of events every semester, like they did a big Thanksgiving thing back in November for everybody who wanted that, which is really fun. And they take trips around different parts of Scotland, like organized trips. And I know that they're going to Urquhart Castle and Loch Ness on the 17th of this month. But it's nice because they'll, you pay a fee and then they get you transportation. They can get you into like fees into the castle and different things like that. So it's a good way to, especially when you get here and you might not know anybody, to kind of get involved right away, but also explore if that's kind of what you're interested in wanting to do. And then I and some of my friends have already gone on quite a number of day trips or just trips around Scotland, but from where we're located with the train and buses, you have a number of options for if you don't want to, travel over the weekend, or you don't want to stay somewhere. You can just easily make a day trip somewhere, and they have student rail cards, so you can get discounts on train tickets. And after just 3 or 4 trips on that, you already have paid for the rail card. So this year I've already gone to Dundee, Elgin, Stonehaven. I went to Crathis Castle like a week and a half ago. And then you're near the beach, which is really nice, and everything's walkable. But if you don't want to walk, there's also the city bus that you can get a student pass for. Also, if it's raining and you just don't want to walk in the rain that day, you can hop on the bus. And then just other fun things to do around. There's lots of pub quizzes, there's shopping, movies, all the normal stuff. But there's always definitely something to do, no matter what you're interested in. So I think that's what I have to say for that.